Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Imperfect Politics. I got a good one for you today. Seems like Steven Guilbeault finally crawled out of whatever hole he was under, and he's starting to do some interviews again. And still trying to promote his carbon tax. So this is going to be a fun one with lots of charts and everything. So just a quick one. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And with no further ado, let's get into it.
My name is Steven Guilbeault. I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. I'm accompanied by many of my colleagues, including Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, who will be speaking after me. So we've heard a lot since the Parliament has resumed, a lot from the opposition leader who will huff, puff, and say that he will blow the House down because of his backward stance on carbon pricing. But let's see what he's really after. What he is doing is defending the interest of the ultra-rich big polluters and the oil and gas industry. By removing carbon rebates that help the middle-class Canadians get...
You mean the industry that employs a ton of people in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba that pays them crazy high wages? Like, if you want to be just a first-year industrial electrician and work in the oil sands, you get paid more than a journeyman electrician. Or else that's what you used to get paid before this carbon tax came in.
Get more money than they pay. He wants to give the oil and gas industry a break. And I don't know about you, but his scaremongering about ludicrous nuclear winter makes absolutely no sense to anyone but him, I'm sure. But we need to come back to reality. He should ask a family of four in his riding if the $1,120 this year that they will be receiving is helping them. And I think most of them would say absolutely. And the same goes for over 58,000 households in his riding that received the rebate last year. But really, he has bigger reason for wanting to cut carbon pricing. He basically wants to make it easier for big polluters and the oil and gas sector. This past weekend, Priya Poilievre's chief advisor, Jenny Byrne, stamped out any notion that a Poilievre government would keep carbon pricing on heavy industry and the oil and gas industry. After a former Harper senior advisor said that they might be doing it, Byrne was quick to correct that Poilievre would cut carbon pricing on industry as well as consumers. That's not surprising. He also wants to cut the clean fuel regulations, which is a policy that they supported in their 2021 campaign platform. And
now, before we get into too much of the Liberal whole thing about, what Pierre Poilievre wants to cut, I want to cover when Guilbeault and the Liberals say that that these $1,120 paychecks are going to go to a family of four, and they really, really, really need it, and what will they do without it? With the amount of taxes and with this carbon tax, yeah, because of you, they really, really need that. But if you don't believe me, and you shouldn't just take my word for it, because I'm just a guy who watches a lot of news and does some research on the internet, let's read some charts from the Parliamentary Budget Officer and from the Taxpayers Federation and see how much this carbon tax actually costs the taxpayer. So this is from the Taxpayer Federation, and they say the cost to administer the carbon tax and rebate scheme from 2019 to 2020. So from 2019, it was over $33 million, and they only had 256 employees. And then in 2020, they had $40 million, 500,000 as a total annual cost with 316 employees. In 2021, it was $42,766,000. And in 2022, it ballooned. It doubled to $82 million, $630,000. to implement this carbon tax. So after all that inflation and everything, just to implement this, and this was 2 years ago, so we don't even know what happened with 2023 and 2024. It's costing us $82 million. And so the Liberals go, oh, but 8 out of 10 Canadians get money back. Yeah, let's look at that. Let's see if Canadians are actually breaking even. So this is from the Parliamentary Budget Officer. So the Liberals themselves. They say, this is the fiscal impact only, that the federal carbon pricing revenues will come largely from households through the consumption of energy used in residential activities such as heating, fuel, and electricity, and in private transport such as motor gasoline, diesel, and lubricants. So Canada is extremely cold, and that's why it's going to be heating fuel and electricity. And in Alberta, electricity is super high. As well as the consumption of non-energy products. So they're even saying here, the Parliamentary Budget Officer is saying that it's going to come off of everything. Because they're saying non-energy products. The remaining revenue will be generated by exports. They go on to say that the government's committed to give back 90% of this. But we all know how well the government handles money, especially with all the corruption that's happening. Especially right now with an environmental action plan that they shut down, SPCT, I believe it is. Yeah, the SPCT scandal. If you haven't heard anything about that, I'll do some videos on it, but you should really go to Northern Perspective and watch their most recent videos, because this is worse than the ArriveCan scandal. Anyways, back to the charts. So this chart is what the Liberals keep referring to, is the quintile distribution of household net carbon tax in 2023 or 2030 to 31. But this is the fiscal impact only. So Albertans, I don't know why they only do Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. I think it's because these are the most affected. So they say the average family will get $845 back, which is 0.7%. Saskatchewan, $495. Manitoba, $310, and this is in the end. So, and Ontario, $113. And we can see here, this is why they say 80% is in the fifth quintile. Saskatchewan won't get anything back. Manitoba won't get anything back. And Ontario won't get anything back. And they're hardly getting anything back in the fourth quintile. But they also have down here, but when we actually go down to fiscal and economic impacts, and this is including the fuel charge and GST paid, plus the income loss due to the economic impact of fuel charge and federal equivalent OBPS, gross carbon tax, less rebates received, and income tax reduction. So, Alberta won't get anything back in the second quintile. Whoops. Alright. Apparently I can't highlight that. So, they won't get anything back during the second quintile, third quintile, fourth quintile, and fifth quintile, when you take economic impacts into it. So they'll be at a net loss, except for in the first quintile. So they'll be paying $2,284 more than they're getting back. Saskatchewan, they'll be the same way, except they won't get anything back during the third quintile. So they're going to pay $1,464 over what they'll get back. Manitoba will be paying $1,145 over, and Ontario will be paying $1,461. And this is what the Conservatives are saying. When you take into the economic impacts, we're being destroyed. We're losing money. And think about what you could do with over $1,000. As an Albertan, think what you could do with over $2,000. That's a month's worth of food. Or, well, if you're really spending a lot. And this is from that, and this is a year. So a year you're paying this much money. And they even say, right here, right, the parliamentary budget officer says, when the income source, when the economic impact is combined with the fiscal impact, the net carbon cost increases for all households, reflecting the overall negative economic impact, so negative economic impact of the fuel charge and federal equivalent under the government's HEHE plan. Indeed, most households will see a net loss resulting from federal carbon pricing. That is the fuel charge from 2030 to 31. That is the overall cost, which now include the fuel charge and the GST paid, and lower employment and investment income. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing lower employment by the oil and gas sectors and a lot of other sectors that are saying the tax is too much. And lower employment and investment income exceed the rebate and the induced reduction in personal income taxes arising from the loss of income. The largest net loss is for households in the top income quintile in Alberta. So Albertans, you're going to take the brunt of the force here. 2.8% of disposable income. 2.8%. And the largest net gain is in the lowest income quintile in Saskatchewan. But that's because it's supposed to be distributed to the lowest income. But the lowest income is still losing money. So that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter if the lowest income is getting the most back because they're still losing money. And they go on to say, the finding that most households incur a net loss in 2030 to 31 from federal carbon pricing under HEHE contrasts, with the result based on the fiscal impact where for the vast majority of households in the backstop provinces, their rebates exceed their carbon costs. So they're saying in these massive economic hubs and in these provinces, and they're not even including all the provinces, which is weird, you're seeing a net loss. How's about that? So who knows in like British Columbia and all of these other provinces what's going to happen? Like what's going to happen in the Yukon when they open up more mines, if they ever do? So, because the Yukon has, from what I know, a lot of gold, and who knows what else they're going to find up there. Especially when they're trying to find lithium. So the Liberals know this. The Liberals have this. And they're willing to destroy people. Not through ignorance, but through just plain... I can only call this ideology. And this is horrible to do to people because you know that this is going to harm everybody. And we know when people can't afford to eat, we tend to not care about the environment. Or we care about the environment less and less and less. So, I think I've ranted enough about this, but I wanted to show everybody, because this is a serious, serious matter, that even the parliamentary budget officer says that this is wrong. Now back to the video after that big rant. Let's see what else he's got to say.
Many of our policies, including the clean fuel regulations, have led to investment in the cleaner fuel sector of $53 billion in Canada over the past few years. He wants to cut that. He wants to cut the industrial system. But what he's really doing is pitching for his rich friends and oil and gas CEOs. Records show that in a recent fundraiser event, he accepted maximum donation from a large group of oil and gas CEOs, including the CEO of one of the most preeminent oil sands companies. It is their interests that he's protecting. I can assure you that oil executives don't show up to my fundraisers. Whether it's the oil and gas sector or those with big yacht, many cars, he wants to give polluters a free pass. But he should not get one.
Well, of course, why would they show up to your rallies when all you spout is a carbon tax, which increases their taxes? You don't give them any answers for technology, where when Pierre Poilievre talks to them, he's like, we're going to axe the tax and we're going to invest in technology. So that's actually something these companies can do. And they're already starting with filters and carbon capture. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical on carbon capture, just because where they put the carbon. And I'm kind of a little bit weirded out of why can't you just increase the amount of trees that you plant? Because the best things to capture carbon are trees. So, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's the way they want to do it.
Emissions have dropped to their lowest level in 25 years. In fact, we've never seen emissions go down in this country when the economy has gone up. Every time that the emissions have gone down in the past, it was because of economic or financial recession, COVID, but it's the first time that they go down because of measures that we are putting in place. And carbon pricing is a cornerstone of those measures. Third-party projections show that emissions would be 41% higher under a Pierre Poilievre plan do-nothing approach. That's the equivalent of adding on our roads 69 million internal combustion engine. Pierre Poilievre must come clean with Canadians. His plan will gut and cut everything, and everything for a cleaner economy and a better future for all Canadians. Notre plan climatique fonctionne. Les émissions.
Yeah, it makes sense because people are too poor to travel as much. Plus, the cost of just used cars itself has skyrocketed. I can tell you, I bought an extremely old vehicle and I had to pay around $5,000 for it. And I had to wait about 8 months to find it. And for people who don't earn as much as I do, if their car goes on them, then they're going to have to, they won't have a vehicle for the longest time. So, yeah, they won't be driving. And when you can't afford food, you're not going to be driving. You're going to worry about food and shelter before you worry about driving, even though you usually need to drive to get to work. So that means the Liberals are ready and willing to make people poor to try and make to do this. Because they're not willing to invest money in different ways to find a way for Canadians to get richer, all while making the environment better. And it's really interesting to see that after 9 years, just all of a sudden, it went down when it's shown that, when there's charts that show that carbon in Canada hasn't gone down since the Liberals have been in. So I'm definitely going to have to check whatever sources Guilbeault is spouting right here, because I can't tell you that I'm really trusting them right now. I think they're cherry picking and manipulating.
Is there a world in which the government scales back the rate of increase of the carbon price, or does something else to kind of soften it to help with affordability concerns in the next election or in the coming months?
I would sincerely disagree with the premise of your question that carbon pricing is hurting affordability. I think that both what Minister Wilkinson and I have shown, demonstrated, what 300 economists, independent organizations have also shown, is that the majority of Canadians are better off with carbon pricing and the rebate than without it. So that's the first answer to the question. The second part of the answer to your question is no.
But how can you say it doesn't have an impact?
Well, you gotta admire that he was straight up with that. But who were those 300 economists? That's what I'm wondering. Were they just random economists from all walks of life? Or were these like the intellectual liberals who are or I can't say that word because of YouTube, but the global forum people who are ideologically aligned with your rhetoric.
Impact on affordability when almost a year ago the Prime Minister stood here and announced a carve-out for home heating oil as Canadians complained and talked about a cost of living crisis.
I don't want to monopolize the microphone, maybe my friend.
Was that not the moment where your government admitted there was a connection between carbon pricing and affordability?
No.
Sorry, I gotta pause there, and it's hilarious when the minister who's in cabinet, who's at the forefront of this carbon tax plan, he gets one hard question. And he just like, okay, I'm not going to answer this because it's too hard for me. So I'm going to have another guy answer this and delegate.
So one of the things that we have always said is that the price on pollution needs to be put in place in a manner that is affordable for Canadians. The one exception in terms of people getting more money back were people who actually heat their homes with heating oil, because it's much more expensive, 3 to 4 times as expensive than natural gas in most parts of the country. And so we looked at that situation. We said we actually need to address that issue in the context of an affordability challenge. We have addressed the broader issues of affordability in the structure of carbon pricing that exists. It's not an exemption, it's a pause. And during that pause, we're actually paying for people to implement heat pumps to be able to reduce their emissions and the cost of actually heating their homes. And then the price will go back on. It was to address that one niche area where there was an affordability challenge, and we ensured that we actually did that in a manner that was short term, and that did it in a manner that was consistent with everybody else, which is 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back.
You focus a lot in your comments today on Mr.
Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with the liberal minister who is there, who was probably going to be voted out if they didn't do anything about the carbon tax on home heating oil, which in the Maritimes is mainly used. And these heat pumps that they're going to put in, they're not that good in 40-degree weather. So anywhere else, like, I don't know how cold it gets in the Maritimes. I'm assuming it gets super, super cold. I know it gets super, super snowy. But anywhere else in Canada where home heating oil is used, which is pretty much nowhere except for northern Quebec, if heat pumps are put in there, that's going to freeze in minus 40-degree weather. And I can tell you in Edmonton, it gets to minus 40. So what do you think is going to happen to humans when it hits minus 40 and they have no heat in their house? They will freeze. And those heat pumps will most likely stop working because they pump water or they pump some sort of fluid in there. And when that freezes, it's going to blow the pump. And so even when after it hits that minus 40, they're going to have no heat for days. But of course, the Liberals, they probably know that, but they don't really care. All they care about is staying in power.
Poilievre But why do
He
you
is
think?
the
But
leader
why
of
do
the
you
opposition.
think? Why do you think your climate plan is not resonating with Canadians?
Well, it's much easier to say axe to tax and leave it at that than to explain to Canadians, well, climate change is real and we need to be doing something about it. And this is one of the measures we've put in place, and this is how it works. Like, you can say axe to tax in 10 seconds. Explaining why we need to act on climate and how carbon pricing and the rebate works is much more difficult. That being said, we've shifted the way we talk about it, and we are seeing that more and more Canadians understand that they are getting the rebate, that it is helping them, and that's what we will continue doing in the coming months.
Minister, are you suggesting Canadians just don't get it?
Actually, I'm going to keep on putting that through because...
No, I'm saying it's a complex issue. And it's been I've been working on climate change. I've been working on climate change for over 30 years, and over those 30 years, many organizations have been working to help Canadians understand. And Canadians are no different than Europeans or Americans. It is a complex issue to understand.
I can tell you why Canadians didn't understand or didn't know that they got the carbon tax back is because we get also our income tax check back. And before, when you got your carbon tax, what is it? Check, if you actually got the physical check, it was in small text that said carbon tax. So it looked exactly the same as your income tax check. So people probably didn't know, like, especially me, I didn't know and I didn't care whether it was income tax or carbon tax. So that was the first issue. And second issue is a lot of people don't really check on their phones all the time. What they get back if they have automatic deposit into their bank. And a lot of people don't have banking apps. So of course they wouldn't know if they got it. And of course, before, the government didn't put, and I don't think they do now, whether this was a carbon tax rebate into your bank account if it was automatic. So yeah, of course people wouldn't know, because you don't make it clear. And even if they do know, then they do know. But still, Canadians know that they get it, they just don't know if they got it. And when CBC and all of them made the whole video on, oh, do you know whether or not you got your carbon tax check back, they didn't ask Canadians whether they get it, they asked them whether they got it, which is totally different. And so he's pretending, or he's saying that Canadians are stupid, which is, of course, is what a rich, out-of-touch liberal minister would say.
From its own consumer carbon pricing, is it fair to argue that the national consensus still exists that this is a viable policy?
I don't think the NDP knows where the NDP stands on this. We've heard the leader of the NDP says that.
Just on emissions, Cabinet Minister, can we get an update on the...
It may no longer support a consumer carbon price. What do you make of that then? If they don't support it, if the province of British Columbia is ready to walk away from its own consumer carbon pricing, is it fair to argue that the national consensus still exists that this is a viable policy?
I don't think the NDP knows where the NDP stands on this. We've heard the leader of the NDP says that he wasn't sure, but we've heard MPs saying, no, we still support carbon pricing. So I think you should ask them, really. But the fact remains, everything that Jonathan said, like 300 economists, independent organizations, the International Monetary Funds, the World Bank, are all saying that this is one of the best measures to fight.
Up. I'm stopping it right there. Listen to what organizations he just said. I'm going to replay that just in case you didn't catch it.
National consensus still exists that this is a
leader of the NDP says, but the fact remains, everything that Jonathan said, like 300 economists, independent organizations, the International Monetary Funds, the World
International Monetary Fund, a globalist community who's ideologically for combating climate change with a carbon tax. And then he says the World Bank, which, of course, they're bankers. Taxes have to go to them, especially half of our taxes, because if Canadians need to go into debt just to pay their bills and pay for food, then they get the interest off of it. So of course they would think it was awesome. If Canadians don't go into debt, they get nothing for that. They hate people who don't go into debt.
World Bank are all saying that this is one of the best measures to fight climate change. And the Canadian system is not only an environmental measure, but it's also a social measure, helping Canadians with affordability. Jonathan, I don't think...
Maybe just a word about British Columbia, because you raised British Columbia. British Columbia, I think, is a little bit different from the federal New Democrats, who seem to be at sea in terms of what their plan is to address climate change. And I think there are a lot of folks who voted for the NDP in 2021 who will be questioning what they are doing with respect to climate change. British Columbia is different. They have a climate plan. It is a good climate plan, and they have been a collaborative partner. But the comments most recently by Premier Eby, and I've discussed this with Premier Eby, were interesting, and I have suggested to Premier Eby that the challenge with the British Columbia plan is exactly what he says. It's affordability, because they take a lot of the money into general revenue and they do not give it back. So I think the way to solve the affordability challenge, which Premier Eby raised, it wasn't a climate issue, it was an affordability issue, was to actually put in place the federal system, which actually ensures that most people get more money back.
That is the dumbest thing I've heard. So, what he's saying is the Premier of British Columbia wants to get rid of theirs, which puts money back into the province, because people of British Columbia would rather put their money into the federal government. That's what he's saying. I'm assuming actually what it is they're saying that British Columbia doesn't want a carbon tax anymore. They don't want that because it's too expensive. Now, I don't actually know that. I don't live there. I don't really follow their politics very much. So if you live in BC, let me know down below in the comments what's actually going on there. From what I heard, it's so expensive. People are going to America to get their gas and then coming back. But like I said, let me know. I'm kind of curious about whether I'm right or not.
On the emissions cap, can we get an update on where that is? What are the roadblocks? And you mentioned, rich oil companies. They've complained about the emissions cap design so far. Are they being a roadblock?
Well, let's be clear. The oil and gas sector has opposed most of the things we've done, whether it's clean fuel regulations, whether it's zero-emission vehicles, less methane. I'll give them that. The oil and gas cap. No, I mean, we're finalizing. It's a matter of weeks before we'll be able to present draft regulations on the cap for the emissions of the oil and gas sector. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Merci.
Minister, if you have another moment, I just want to try to understand, did your government misunderstand the buy-in for this? How did a slogan dismantle a consensus?
And it's kind of interesting how they walked away from that, because that is an incredibly good question. Unfortunately, they ended it there, which this video is going pretty long, so I'm going to try and quickly end it here with some of my comments about the oil and gas sector. If you know anything about Canada, we are a big, big part of our economy is exporting resources. So we need our oil and gas sector, we need our mineral sector, we need all of that. We're not like the States where technology is pretty big. Like, technology is a part, but not really. So without oil and gas, without minerals, without all that, we lose a lot of our economy. And that's what our government doesn't understand. And we're one of the best countries to do this because we are environmentally aware. and we want to keep the beauty of our country. And the federal government doesn't understand that. And that's why we're losing out on our GDP. And that's why we're the second lowest in our GDP. I don't think people really understand, and maybe some people, well, they don't understand. I think a lot of people don't remember that during the tail end of the Harper era, we were almost at the same GDP per capita as the United States. Like, our dollar was almost equaling theirs. And after Trudeau, now ours is, I think, 72 cents to the American's dollar. So you can see how terrible our GDP is. Anyways, that's enough of my ranting. I think I went on pretty long, but hopefully this video kind of made you guys understand a little bit more about the truth behind our carbon tax. Let me know down below what you think about the carbon tax. Did this video actually help you understand a little bit more about it, and a little bit more about the truth about it? If you like this video, please leave a like, please leave a subscribe. I'm trying to hit that 500 subscribers by the end of the month, so I can start live streaming. And if you'd like to donate to the channel, I got a Buy Me a Coffee link down below, and that always helps. And other than that, that's all I got for you. Have a great day.